What's up, everybody? This is Raphael Garcia back again this week with Roy Billington to talk about the world of MMA. How you doing today, Roy?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. There's a good weekend of fights so far.
Yeah, it definitely was. We have a lot to talk about, I guess, because we got to kind of catch up from last week and also talk about some of the stuff that happened from the past 7 days. So if you want to reach out to Roy and I with any questions or any comments about the show, you can reach me at rgarcia_sport. And you can also reach Roy at Roy Billington. Pretty simple. We're both there, and we will respond to you on Twitter. You can also uh, tweet us through the show hashtag MMA Ratings Podcast. Again, that's hashtag MMA Ratings Podcast. You can reach us there as well too. So we're gonna jump right in it, and we're gonna start off talking about UFC on Fox 12, the show from last night. What did you think about that show, Roy?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Mix between new fighters coming into their own and obviously established fighters like Robbie Lawler and Matt Brown being given a chance to actually showcase their skills on a big stage. For me, the undercard was really interesting. There was a few big name prospects coming into it, getting their chance. Gilbert Burns, who's of course Vitor Belfort's jiu-jitsu coach, made his debut. He looked good. I think Andreas Stahl was a harder opponent than many were led to believe. Obviously, training with Alexander Gustafsson has made him a tough guy. And personally, I expected more from Gilbert Burns, and just knowing his grappling background, I expected him to take the fight to the ground and get a submission, perhaps. But I think Andreas Stahl's performance is a testament to European mixed martial arts and the progression it's made in recent years.
Do you think he's someone that European martial arts as a whole can kind of hang his flag on? Right now they have Conor McGregor, they've had Michael Bisping in the past. Is he someone that they can kind of hang their hat on and expect him to do well in the sport?
Yeah, I think Stahl has a bright future ahead of him. I believe he will probably fight on October 4th in Stockholm. He'll get his comeback fight there and be fighting at home. I expect to see him victorious in his home country because obviously fighting in the UFC is never easy, but it's even harder when you're fighting in a different country across the Atlantic. But it's going to be interesting to see if he will fight on the October card in Sweden, and it'll be also interesting to see who the UFC would match him up against.
Who were some other
Who
guys?
stuck out to you?
Let's
Who
stick with
stood
the
out to
undercard
you?
first. Let's stick with the undercard first, and kind of look at some of the guys who stood out to us both, and then we'll kind of move on to the main card. Who kind of caught your eye first from the undercard?
Brian Ortega looked pretty good. He's a Gracie guy. He's often in the Gracie breakdowns that Henner and Halleck post. He's a very interesting character, and his jiu-jitsu game is quite phenomenal. Him taking the back of his opponent last night was quite reminiscent of how Henan Barrow took Brad Pickett's back way back at UFC 138. Ortega looked really good, especially considering he's only 23 and he has a 9-0 record, but he hasn't really fought the best of opponents yet. I expected him to not look as finished as he did. He looked very good. He got the early finish, and I think he has a very bright future.
Yeah, I definitely liked what I saw from Brian. He looked really good, as you said. I feel like that grappling and jiu-jitsu themselves are kind of re-emerging in MMA. We'll talk about this later on when we talk about a big signing that the UFC got from last week. But just as a whole, I feel like a lot of the guys who are kind of coming into the sport now and kind of catching some spotlight are guys who are really strong with a grappling base and are kind of building on top of that. You have Brian Ortega, like you mentioned, he's a fighter. You also have Gunnar Nelson. So there's some names that are kind of keeping up across different weight classes who are either stuck in a strong wrestling or grappling background. And I really like that because for a while I was worried that the sport was going to be just striking itself. But hopefully we're kind of moving away from that.
Yeah, I think MMA, like most things, is cyclical. We get the cycles of each martial art come into its own. We had the cycle for years of the dominant wrestler. We had the cycle in recent years of spinning kick, of flashy old school karate moves, and now I think we're coming back into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu being in its own. There's a lot of good up and coming fighters that really specialise in Jiu-Jitsu, and it's going to be an interesting few years for the sport of BJJ, and especially how it's applicable toward MMA.
And there's also someone else that actually caught my attention as well too. I'm not even going to try to say her name because I'm going to completely butcher it. So I'm just going to call her JJ. But what's her name? Joanna. I have no idea how to say her last name, but she looked really good in her strawweight bout as well too. Juliana De Lima. She kind of looked like she really blew herself out early in the fight. But Joanna just basically stuck with what she was doing, landed a lot of very good shots, a lot of good combinations throughout the fight, and it looked like she had an answer for her in every aspect of the bout. So she's someone I look forward to watching, especially as this strawweight division grows, and they need some fakes to kind of carry the early stages of that group.
Yeah, I think that was a very interesting performance. I think also on the undercard there was some good stuff. I think Patrick Cummins was very interesting. Obviously he's coming back from, he got bet by Daniel Cormier. He had one fight since then, and he took this fight on relatively short notice, and he's came in against Kyle Kingsbury. Personally, I didn't want to see Kingsbury fight again. You know, he's taken a few bad beatings, and I really didn't want to see it happen again. Uh, but Cummins did well with what he had in front of him, and he put on a good performance.
Well, luckily for you, you won't have to see Kyle Kingsbury fight again because he actually retired last night. During the post fight after the bout, you know, he announced that he's walking away from the sport again, which is good, you know, because he got ragdolled. He got beat up pretty badly from start to finish. I know that Joe Rogan was giving Cummins some hard time because he didn't finish Kingsbury, but again, you know, it's easy to say that sitting from the outside and not being in the cage yourself. But I liked everything I saw from Patrick. He used exactly what he has, what he can bring to the cage, and he didn't go outside of that. You know, he stuck to his wrestling, and he controlled every aspect of the fight. And his cardio actually looked pretty good too as well, because that's a very grueling way to fight for 15 minutes. But he got the job done from start to finish, and I was pretty impressed with what I saw from him.
Yeah, I think he looked far better than he did in his performance against Roger Navarez. Do you think he's made much of an improvement since then?
I'm not sure if I would call it improvement, and even though you can't see me, I'm doing the hand quotation mark sign because he's been able to fight guys that he can use the skill set against to kind of dominate those fighters. So maybe right now it's hard to say if it's a huge improvement. If the UFC may have put him in there with another wrestler who can kind of fight off some of those takedowns, and maybe we'll see if his striking has improved at all, or how well he does in other areas of the sport. So I'm not going to necessarily say it's a huge improvement. I'm just going to say he's using his tools to the best of his ability right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think obviously we haven't had an opportunity to see the best of him until last night. Before he fought Cormier on 10 days' notice, and then he rushed straight back into another fight, which he didn't look great. He looked somewhat tired in that last fight, I felt, but it was different last night. He grinded hard for 3 rounds. His wrestling looked on point. His ground and pound looked great. I know a lot of people were criticising him for not getting the finish, but Kyle Kingsbury isn't an easy guy to finish. He's got a good chin. I think the only thing I would criticise him for was there was the opportunity to commit maybe to some submissions, but at the end of the day, why risk it? He was in solid positions. He did a smart thing, and he fought smart throughout.
Exactly, I agree with you wholeheartedly on the why risk it question there. So let's keep moving on, and let's talk about some of the other guys that kind of stood out. What did you think of the Jorge Masvidal Darren Cruikshank bout?
Yeah, man, that was crazy. Darren Cruikshank hit Jorge Masvidal with an amazing punch, but Jorge Masvidal has proven once again why he is such a respected fighter. Um, it's often talked about fight IQ and how guys can think their way through a fight. And Jorge Masvidal for me really typifies that. Every performance he has, he makes the right decisions at the right times. He fights smart. He always plays to his opponent's weaknesses, and he always, more often than not, he comes out on top. He's only been bet once in his UFC career. Outside that, the only people to beat him are Gilbert Melendez, and then Paul Daly at Shark Fights, which it's really arguable that Masvidal won that fight as well. I think Masvidal is a very talented fighter, and I'm really interested to see what will come for him next.
Let me ask you this: how did you score the first round? I saw some people who gave it to Darren based solely off of that knockdown, but you have to kind of look at the round itself as a whole. And even though Darren had that clean, that like exciting knockdown early in the fight, I feel like Masvidal did enough throughout the other 4.5 minutes to kind of take the round. How did you score that round?
It's really hard. The criteria toward judging isn't really clear enough. Obviously, Cruikshank was within a few seconds of finishing the fight. One or two more clean punches and the fight was over. So I think that has to be scored heavily. But I agree with you with the fact that Masvidal did land a lot cleaner throughout the rest of the round. I think this should have been a 10-10 round, but they don't give 10-10 rounds. So I think it has to go to Cruikshanks just based on how close he came to finishing the fight.
See, I don't think he came that close though, because he landed that big shot and Jorge went down and he was up before Cruikshank really even had a chance to pounce on him. So I mean, I don't like when they showed the slow motion replay in between rounds 1 and 2, and yeah, Masvidal, his eyes were shut as he went down, but his head didn't even bounce off the mat. It looked like he landed on his hips and he sprung right back up. Cruikshank never even had a chance to take a step towards him and really pounce on him. So I scored that round for Jorge myself because again that was a huge knockdown, but Cruikshank didn't do anything after that. He didn't even have the opportunity to throw another punch at a down Gamebred. So I feel like from looking at it that way that Jorge did enough to kind of take that round over the next 4 minutes or so.
Yeah, and I agree. Moving on in the event, we had Bobby Green v Josh Thompson. That's an interesting fight with regards to judging. How did you score that one?
I scored it for Josh Thompson, but if you were watching my Twitter feed as the fight ended, I'm like, there's no way on earth Bobby Green is going to lose that fight simply because of how MMA judging goes. That was a bad scorecard that everyone saw coming a mile away. Like 5 minutes into the fight, there were tweets going out that this is going to end badly for Josh Thompson because it looked like he was doing enough, but he wasn't doing enough at the same time. And it's sad to see him lose another close split decision like that. It's unfortunate, but this one is different than the Benson Henderson one. I felt like he got robbed when he fought Henderson earlier, late last year. I feel like he got robbed in that fight. But this one here, he basically gave the thief his wallet when he fought the way he did and walked out of the cage with another loss.
Yeah, I feel he perhaps rushed himself back from injury. He was quoted during fight week to say if it wasn't in San Jose, he probably wouldn't have taken the fight. He probably would have waited a little bit longer to heal up. Bobby Green, he looked decent. He didn't do enough in my eyes to win the fight. He showed some good head movement and some decent striking, but I think Josh Thompson deserved the decision. But again, it comes down to Josh Thompson. He didn't show enough to wow the judges, and it's sad to say, but the judges need something like that in this day and age of mixed martial arts. The judges need a big moment or some aggression to score toward, which is a sad state of affairs.
To discussion-wise, what did you think of Bobby Green's antics during the fight?
I think watching Bobby Green, it's something he does, and I certainly don't think it affected Josh Thompson. I think maybe it's a way for Bobby Green to psych himself up. But Josh Thompson's seasoned veteran. He's had Nate Diaz standing in front of him talking crap to him. It's not going to face a guy like him, but it's disrespectful. But I think it's more of it bothers the people watching the fight more than it bothers the other fighter, in my opinion.
I kind of agree with that too. I feel like it bothers more people sitting there watching the sport rather than the opponent. I look at it because this goes on in sports. You see like wide receivers and defensive backs talking to each other during the game. You see it happen on a basketball court. Even catchers talk to the batters who are in the batter box during baseball games. So this happens. I think it's a little more hard to witness when you can clearly hear him talking during the fight. Like you heard every word he said almost throughout the whole contest, and it didn't necessarily bother me. It makes me wonder what he would fight like if he fought in a normal fashion. And again, I use the air quotes around the word normal because this may just be his style. So it's unfortunate that he's called arrogant, cocky, X, Y, and Z, whatever stereotypical word you want to throw in there. But I don't have too much of a problem with it. When he does get knocked out mid sentence, because it may very happen. That's going to be the first thing that people point to. I hope it doesn't happen, but I really don't have too much of a problem with it, and we see it all the time. Like if someone can cheer on the Diaz brothers, but then get mad at Bobby Green for doing it, there's a bigger problem to discuss.
Yeah, I agree with you. Moving on to the next fight, Clay Guida v Dennis Bermudez. What did you make of that fight?
I was hoping. Actually, I sent you a tweet before this fight too. I wanted to
I
try
was
to get
asleep.
you. I was trying to get you to take Clay Guida on a bet. Cause something told me he was going to lose that fight. I thought it was going to be by a decision. Though I didn't expect for Dennis to stop him the way he did, and he made it look kind of easy. Honestly, first round he was thoroughly in control from start to finish of that fight, and then when round two started, Clay Guida looked good. Like he was putting together some good combinations, and actually right before Bermudez took him down to kind of set up the series where he takes his back and chokes him out, Guida hit like a good 1-2 combination and it looked like he was going for a shot, but Bermudez caught him and took him down instead, which then led to him taking the Carpenter's back and ending the fight. So I was impressed by what I saw from Dennis. For sure, he got the stop on Clay Guida, and I think he's someone that should be getting more attention than a lot of the featherweights in the division. I think that was his seventh straight win there. So it's unfortunate he's kind of getting like the Jim Miller treatment. But this guy, it's not like he's not exciting, and he's putting on some good fights. So I hope that they give him something big for his next bout. I actually mentioned Frankie Edgar on Twitter, and some people liked that suggestion there. So I think that would be a good fight for both of those guys later on this year.
Yeah, I think Frankie v Bermudez makes sense. Obviously, with Bermudez coming from New York and Frankie being from Jersey, I think the rivalry between the two fan groups would be interesting as well. Bermudez, obviously, he's won 7 in a row. But again, he's not getting the acclaim he deserves. He's a very exciting fighter, and I enjoy watching him. I have a feeling now that he's going to get fed to the wolves. So obviously he'll either get Frankie or Cub Swanson. Either fight will be near on impossible for Bermudez, in my opinion. I can't see how he beats Frankie, and Cub Swanson's just on it here. But it's sad seeing guys like McGregor getting so much praise when there's fighters like Bermudez who are doing better, beating higher level guys, and not getting any of the acclaim.
And again, that all goes down to like how these guys are talking. I feel like if you were to flip those two guys, and that was Conor McGregor fighting last night, and he just defeated Clay Guida, the post-fight press conference would have been totally different. He would have been calling out heavyweights. He would have called out anybody by name in that segment, and Dennis didn't do the same thing. So I feel like those 2 to 3 minutes that they're giving these guys when they put the mic in front of their face is very important. Conor's taking advantage of it. Dennis Bermudez didn't really take any advantage of it, so that's why he finds himself in that position to where he's ranked 12th by the UFC after putting away 7 guys. But Conor McGregor has won 3 fights against lesser talent, and he's ranked number 10, talking about getting a title shot sometime this year. Like, that's almost crazy to even think about it, but that's just the UFC as a business model, and this is sports entertainment first before just regular sports.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think for prospects, it's important that they face a test like Clay Guida or like a Nick Lentz. I think it's just a really good gauge of how far they can go. Clay Guida is obviously so tough, and so many times in the past he's caused a lot of top prospects trouble. He bet Anthony Pettis, so if you beat Clay Guida, there's something great about you, and if you finish Clay Guida, there's something really great about you. And I think there's something great about Dennis Bermudez, and I'm really excited to see what happens to him going forward. Personally, like if there's any injuries kind of lead up to UFC 178, if McGregor or if Poirier gets injured, I'd love to see Bermudez jump in there and get a big fight there on that card. But if not, he should try move forward to a fight with Frankie or a fight with Club.
That's actually a good suggestion there. Even if they put, because Chad Mendes and Jose Aldo just got rescheduled for UFC 179 in Brazil. So even if they kind of paired Cub Swanson and Dennis Bermudez together for that fight with the little backdrop where if an injury occurs in the main event, they can be swapped out. That's something good to go with there too as well.
Agreed.
So let's keep going with the main card there, and we're going to there. So let's go with the co-main event where you have Anthony Johnson and Antonio Nogueira. Man, like this fight right here was one of those fights where you knew it was going to get ugly. You just didn't know how fast it was going to get ugly, and Anthony Johnson just beat the brakes off of this guy. Like it was bad. Like the slow motion replays of the look on Antonio's face when he saw the punches coming, and then two, like the way his face rippled when he was taking the shots. It was almost hard to watch. I didn't turn away from the screen, but it was definitely like crazy to see this guy taking those blows, and Herb Dean basically saved his life.
Yeah, it was very reminiscent of Lil Nog v Sokuju and Pride. It was that sort of blitz at the start of the fight that put him away. I think the result was a culmination of things. Obviously, Lil Nog hasn't fought in so long. He's been injured so much, but also Anthony Johnson has improved so much since even since the Phil Davis fight. He's looked far more improved. It was a very impressive performance from him. Lil Nog is no mean feat to put away. But I think he deserved a bigger name opponent, and I hope to see him get a big name opponent pretty soon.
Okay, we're actually going to touch on that in a second to continue this part of the conversation. So before we get to that, let's talk about the main event and what were some of your thoughts watching Robbie Lawler and Matt Brown go at it?
Yeah, in my head, Robbie Lawler was always going to win this fight. Matt Brown, he's a great fighter, but stylistically, I think Robbie Lawler is just not a good matchup for him. He's a better wrestler. He's a better kickboxer, and he has heart, which a lot of the guys I think Matt Brown bet didn't have heart. I think Robbie Lawler looked pretty good, and he's done enough to get his title shot. But Matt Brown, I think, will be very upset with his performance today. I think, coming up in the week, he spoke about how his training camp changed in the lead up to this fight, and as it goes, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think he's fixed it when it didn't need to be fixed, and his performance, I think, showed it.
This was an interesting fight from the very beginning because I felt like Matt Brown didn't look quite like himself in the first couple of minutes. I was waiting for that moment where he would land a big shot and kind of hurt Robbie Lawler and do what Matt Brown does, but that moment never really came. I don't think he had the doors completely blown off of him like most people thought he would. Everybody thought that I myself didn't think this fight was going to last the full 25 minutes, but it definitely went the distance, and they had their back and forth exchanges. I gave Matt the last round. That's the only one I gave him, and I think he looked. I want to say maybe the third round he looked pretty good too as well. So maybe second or third. I don't quite remember at this point in time, but I definitely gave him the fifth round. Did you give him anything beyond that?
No, not really. It's just sad, I expected a better fight. I think as the MMA community put too much faith in this fight being one of the best fights of all time, and so often when it happens, when we put so much faith behind the fight, it kind of fails to deliver. Before the fight, Joe Rogan said, "There's no way this is going to decision," and the minute he said that, I knew this fight was going to decision, because the commentator's curse always comes true, and it was a decent fight, decent performance from Robbie Lawler. Is it enough to have fans clamouring for a rematch with Johnny Hendricks? I don't think so. but he probably will get the rematch now, and that should be interesting.
Actually, let's touch on one thing first. I think both Matt Brown and Robbie Lawler have had better fights this year. The Robbie Lawler Johnny Hendricks fight was obviously better, and I think the Matt Brown Eric Silva fight was better than this one as well too, because both guys were clearly hurt at different points in the bout. So this was a good fight for sure, no problems whatsoever. But I feel like there have been, I mean, I can think of maybe 5 fights this year that have already been better than what we saw, just overall judgment wise last night. The rematch for Hendricks Lawler, I believe, has been announced as well. So I think that's going to be the main event for their New Year's weekend card. Whatever UFC that is after New Year's Eve, I believe is the date for Hendricks Lawler too. I'm kind of looking forward to it because I would like to see Robbie Lawler win. I feel like he had a good chance to win the first one, and I think he's someone. I think he's someone that could be. They both have potential star power, but I would like to see just Robbie in that position a little bit more than Hendricks. One interesting point is that they both have recently signed some pretty big deals. Johnny Hendricks is now sponsored by Reebok, and Matt Robbie Lawler is sponsored by Adidas. So I think they are getting their star quality for sure. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they're paired up against each other early next year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, especially considering how long Johnny Hendricks will be laid off for. In that fight, I edge toward giving that fight toward Robbie Lawler, so I'm very interested to see the rematch, and I think whoever wins that fight will probably unify the belt with GSP for the July weekend. If I was to guess right now, I'd say that's going to happen, because obviously that would play into his comeback schedule, if you would.
So let's continue from there since we already know what's next for Robbie Lawler. Let's talk about what's next for the rest of just the main card. Let's stick with the guys who won the main card. And Anthony Johnson. So a lot of people are saying he may be next in the light heavyweight division. Some people have pointed towards the winner of the Ryan Bader OSP matchup, which is about 2 or 3 weeks away. So, what do you think should be next for the fighter known as Rumble?
It depends on Gustafsson's injury. If Gustafsson can be back in time before year's end, I think they should probably fight. Give the winner of John Jones Daniel Cormier a break and have Gustafsson fight once more. The Ryan Bader OSP fight, I don't think it makes sense. At the end of the day, I was just thinking to myself earlier, who's going to buy tickets to see Ryan Bader v OSP? To me, that fight is just meh. If that was on the TV, I'd be tempted to turn it over because neither fighter really brings it for me, and I really can't believe that it's headlining on a card.
Yeah, like that definitely just goes back to the oversaturation question there. It is what it is. We're at that point in the sport where we're gonna get fight cards like this throughout the year. So we either have to, and again, this is where we kind of have to decide if we're going to watch and if we're not. Unfortunately, since we do this as part of our career, we have to watch them in some capacity. So we just got to suck it up and do it. But as far as like the mainstream and hardcore fans, they definitely have the opportunity to decide, okay, I'm going to go out and party tonight, or I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z instead of stay home and watch this fight.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how ticket sales are doing for that event. Obviously, it's in Bangor, Maine, so I don't think their market's oversaturated with fights. But when you look at that card, I think the co-main event is Sean Jordan v Jack May, according to Shardog here. That mustn't be right. But if that's the co-main event, that's crazy. They've got really no names on the card, so I can't see that even selling many tickets, to be honest with you. But yeah, that'll be interesting. But obviously, I think Anthony Johnson deserves a bigger name than either Bader or OSP. Who, in all honesty, he would put away either of those two guys pretty easy. Stylistically, he matches up really well with both of those guys. I think it's a waste of a fight. I would be more interested in seeing him maybe fight the winner of Cormier and Jones, or maybe Gustafsson when he comes back.
Yeah, I feel like they're going to give Alexander a title shot right when he comes back. They're not going to make him wait any longer. So I can agree with you with him facing either Bader or excuse me, Bader or OSP, depending on who wins. I think there may be some other decent fights there at light heavyweight as well too, because like there but Anthony Johnson definitely deserves someone that if he can pull off a win, then he should get a title shot. I'm trying to look and see who's available right now. I know someone had mentioned taking Glover Teixeira and putting him against Anthony Johnson. Glover Teixeira is supposedly on close to a deal to fight to fight Phil Davis. So that fight right there may happen, which will leave Anthony Johnson out. But there are some opportunities there for him, and if it looks like it'll be the winner of the OSP Ryan Bader fight, then that's just what we're going to have to take.
Agreed.
What do you think? Dennis Bermudez, we already mentioned him fighting Frankie Edgar. Let's talk about Bobby Green and Jorge Masvidal together. Jorge Masvidal has already tried to challenge Donald Cerrone, and I feel like that would be a good fight for either Bobby Green or Jorge Masvidal. If whichever guy doesn't fight Cerrone, then maybe the other should fight Michael Johnson because he's someone who's coming up as well. I know Green was already supposed to fight Michael Johnson at one point in time, but that fight got scrapped due to an injury situation. So either way, I would like to see those four guys kind of paired up in some type of matchup.
Yeah, I read some rumors that the UFC are looking toward booking Bobby Green v Donald Cerrone. I think that fight would be very interesting. That'd be a very good stylistic matchup, as would Masvidal v Michael Johnson. So hopefully they'll get paired up against each other.
Yeah, I think that there's some good quality there. What do you think of Jorge Masvidal in the lightweight division? Do you think, or actually, let's I'm gonna rephrase that. What do you think of Bobby Green and Jorge Masvidal in the lightweight division? Do you see any one of these guys kind of cracking the top five? Because Jorge did challenge for the Strikeforce title at one point in time. He has good grappling, he has good wrestling, and he definitely can strike with anyone. Bobby Green has good wrestling as well too, and we've seen his grappling and his striking leaves something amiss to me. I feel like he doesn't have enough volume to really be a threat to a lot of guys, but he's been putting together a pretty good streak. So do you see either one of these guys kind of cracking that top five?
Yeah, well, Bobby Green bet Josh Thompson, who's ranked number 3 in the world at the minute. But as you said, like it's hard to say if they break into the top 5 consistently, beat top 5 caliber guys as well. And just looking at the top 5 now, we have Donald Cerrone, Nurmagomedov, Melendez, Henderson, and Pettis all there. I can't see Bobby Green beating any of them, and I can't see Jorge Masvidal beating any of them. I think Nurmagomedov would beat both Green and Masvidal, and I think the same can be said for Ben Henderson, Gilbert Melendez, and Tom Cerrone.
Okay, I can definitely ride with that. So we're gonna keep this train going, and we're gonna talk about Bellator 122, which was actually on Friday. This isn't the Bellator card I was looking forward to. I'm looking forward to their one on September 5th, which we'll talk about in a moment. But did anyone kind of impress you from Bellator 122?
I think Brandon Halsey was very impressive. He's a wrestler coming into mixed martial arts. He doesn't have too much experience. It was his 7th fight against Brett Cooper. Brett Cooper is very experienced. Brett Cooper's been there, done that. He's fought numerous big fights. He's fought for the title. But it took 2 minutes for Brandon Halsey to get a victory, and that really impressed me. At 27, I think he's a solid prospect.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that. I like what I saw from two fighters in particular. Liam McGarry, he's still undefeated and he looked really good in his stoppage. And he scored a first round stoppage in 2 minutes 10 seconds, which is exactly what he needs to continue doing at this point to kind of build up some hype around him. And Bubba Jenkins got another win. I know a lot of people were expecting Bubba to kind of be further along in his career at this point in time, but I think he's taking the right pace. He's lost one fight, so he knows what that felt like, but he's kind of rebounded from that, and he's looking good. So we can't continue to kind of rush guys anymore because we'll see guys get rushed, and then we'll see their lights get put out, and then everyone kind of forgets about them. So I think he's taking the right path to building himself up into a marketable name that once the time is ready, he'll be able to move on to a bigger promotion.
Yeah, I think Bubba's looking good. I think Bubba will probably make it to the UFC at some point. Stylistically, like even during his wrestling days, you could see how his style would fit into mixed martial arts. His grappling plays into the mixed martial arts style of grappling. So it was a natural progression for him to come to MMA. I think he definitely has a bright future, but I don't know. I think Liam McGreary might have a brighter future. Um, he's looked amazing in all his fights so far. He's training with the right people, and I think he has a very bright future ahead of him.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you about that. What did you think of Andre Koreshkov?
He's a solid guy. Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard one to state where would you put him like rankings wise in MMA at the minute because obviously he hasn't beaten anyone really of note. The one ranked guy that he really fought was Ben Askren, and Ben Askren dominated him. So it's very hard to say how you'd rank him, and I think a lot of people are going to be apprehensive about ranking these Bellator guys highly after what happened to Alexander Shlemenko when he fought Tito Ortiz. You know, a lot of people had Shlemenko in their top five middleweights in the world, and he got destroyed by a pasta Tito Ortiz. So it's hard. Koreshkov is doing good against who he's being put up against, but who he's being put up against aren't great, if you understand.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you there. Did you see Carl Parisian and his comments? You know, he stopped Phil Baroni in I think it was like 2 minutes or something like that. He stopped Phil pretty quickly, um, and now he's saying that he is back and that he can win the welterweight title basically with his eyes closed. Do you see him kind of reemerging as a welterweight in Bellator? You see him putting on a run, or is this just basically an effect of who he's fought?
Yeah, and beating Phil Baroni at this point in his career isn't much. I think Phil Baroni would probably get knocked down by Breeze at this point. You know, he's past it. Phil Baroni's past it. Cara Parisian, he was an amazing fighter and he had an amazing future ahead of him at one point, but then he tore his hamstring. He lost a lot of his hamstring and quad muscle. Then he got addicted to painkillers, and then his career just declined. But before that, that guy was a beast. His fights with Diego Sanchez, his fights with Nick Diaz, they were some of the best fights I've ever watched, and it was sad to see how he went. But I really don't see how he's going to come back to his former highs.
I hope he does because you know he was somebody that really kind of caught a lot of attention early. I think he ever gets back to like the UFC level. They gave him that opportunity and he kind of booked it. Seeing him do well right now is definitely good to see. And I don't. I'm kind of leery on saying that he'll win the Bellator welterweight title because I couldn't even see him really winning a tournament right now unless if it was kind of geared that way. If they did one of those four-man tournaments that was kind of geared to them getting the decision that they want. But you know he is in the he's in Bellator at the right time, and we're going to use that to kind of segue into this part here. With Scott Coker being there, is this an opportunity for him to kind of leapfrog anyone who's fighting in a tournament or anyone who would be in front of him in line just because of the fact that he has a name. Like, is he doing this at the right point in time where he can kind of sneak his way up to the top?
Right now, I think it's a good opportunity for anyone fighting in Bellator who has got good mic skills because the promotion is looking for stars. A guy like Carl Parisian, if he gets on a microphone and he calls out the big names, if he's vocal about who he wants, he's going to get it, I believe. Because obviously, yeah, Bellator are looking for a big star. Carl Parisian is the name power. He's got two straight wins to back it up. He's got two knockouts, if I'm correct, to back it up. So I think he could talk himself into a big fight, if not a title shot.
Are you looking forward to what Bellator does next? You know, has the signing of Scott Coker kind of got your attention? Like, do you think that they're worth watching? Are you looking forward to their next card? I know I am for a fact. There's a couple of fights that I'm looking forward to when they return on September 5th.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what comes up with Bellator next. Obviously, last night's event was still essentially a Bjorn Rebney event. It was with the fighters that had been booked by Sam Kaplan and Bjorn. It was an event, but I think the coming season of Bellator is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what Scott Coker can do with the organization, and I'm very interested to see if they cross promote with Glory, and maybe we'll get some really big name fights coming over the next few months.
Yeah, I know the card on the 5th, is headlined by Pat Kern and Patricio Freire. So I think that's a big fight. I can't wait to see as well. It's a rematch of a very close, controversial fight. Muhammad Law was fighting Tom DeBlas at 205. Bobby Lashley, who is a player in TNA wrestling, he is fighting in Bellator as well. So I'm not, he's not like a huge prospect or anything like that. People thought he was going to be great, but he's definitely a name that will grab some attention. And Chet Congo and LeVar Johnson are fighting as well, so somebody's definitely going to get put out on that fight right there. So like there's some good fights worth fighting as watching as well. Dan Kramer is fighting again. He's someone that I'm kind of high on, who I've always thought has been pretty good. So there's some value on their card coming up on September 5th.
Definitely, there's some very, very interesting fights, and I think Viacom is a great fit for Scott Coker because they have a lot of money, and they also have the TNA guys as well as the Glory guys, so there could be some cross promotion definitely going on.
Good, good. So let's look at some of the news stories that went down in MMA this past week, and we're going to start with the fact that Gina Carano is still not signed by the UFC. There was rumors that the deal is expected to be done on Monday, but she's still not officially under contract. So, what do you think about that? Is that like a major red flag, or should we even really be concerned about that where there's other stories going on in women's MMA right now?
Yeah, well, according to Dave Meltzer's podcast, he said that it's pretty much a done deal, and it's just to do with her studio deal at the moment that they haven't announced dates yet. Because obviously they need to cross-reference all of them when she's going to be recording films or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a matter of time before that deal gets done. But should we be talking about it? Probably not. We've got so many great women's fighters in the UFC right now that deserve the press. Gina Carano hasn't fought for a long time, and even when she last fought, she wasn't impressive. She's never made the weight class, and I personally, I'm not too interested in the fight. More so just for the shock factor, or just for the freak show factor of what's inevitably going to come when Ronda Rousey hip tosses her and arm bars her or pounds her out.
Yeah, I'm more looking forward to the strawweight division and what's kind of coming along because the two fights that they have put on so far have been good. They've had two women come out of these bouts looking like okay, the division can be built around them because they put on some exciting fights. They were good pace. They showed all like a complete MMA skill set. Then we also have Tough 20 coming up, which will crown the first champion, and there are some notable women on that season as well too. So I think that should kind of be more the focus right now instead of what Gina Carano's going to do. I know another good story coming out of women's MMA is Ronda Rousey's going to be featured in a short film, like a documentary style film that's going to be on ESPNW, which is more focused towards women's sports. So again, she won an ESPY last month, I believe it was, or earlier this month, and now she's being chronicled by ESPN as a whole. Doesn't really touch MMA in any way, shape, or form. So this is definitely something worth noting. But Gina Carano shouldn't be the big story right now in MMA. When it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Because like you said, what we're going to see is we're going to see her get tossed, and we're going to see her get armbarred within 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's a given the result of the fight, and I think more people are just interested in the hype that's going to be pre-fight, whether or not the mainstream media are going to get behind the fight, and how it's going to come from there. It's going to be interesting to see how many pay-per-view buys that event does, because rumor has it it's going to be on the event, the Melendez Pettis event, which already has two title fights earmarked for it. So it would be a triple header, which could be interesting, but. Man, I don't know. I can't see it doing too many buys. I think there's interest, but there's not. I think the interest is overestimated within the general public, at least.
Yeah, I think that they find a way to make that the main event and not necessarily make it the co-main or something like that. I feel like it does I'm with you on that. I'm not sure, how many big deal buys it will be, but it'll draw some attention across the board. And since we're talking about drawing attention, the UFC got one of their biggest stars back when Nick Diaz signed a three-fight extension last week. Dana White used his Twitter handle to announce it. So, what do you think about that? And what do you think the Stockton native brings coming back into the octagon?
Yeah, I think it's good for the UFC that Nick Diaz comes back. He's interesting. The fans like to watch him, and he puts on good fights. But I think for Nick Diaz, we need to see more fights with title implications. I know a lot of people talk about Anderson Silva for Nick Diaz, but that fight makes no sense to me. I'd rather see Nick Diaz fight maybe fight Matt Brown. Nick Diaz v Matt Brown. That'd be a great fight. Diaz v Robbie Lawler again, great fight. There's so many great fights in his own division for Nick Diaz that if he's serious about a comeback and he's serious that he wants to be champion, he needs to take those fights.
Yeah, it definitely, in my opinion, first let me talk about the Anderson Silva fight. I disagree with you there. It doesn't make sense from a rankings point of view, of course, but it makes sense from a entertainment point of view, which again, we got to realize that that's what the UFC is in first. And that bout could definitely be like a main event of I wouldn't necessarily. Well, the UFC is moving away from having non-title fights as pay-per-view main events anyway. But this could definitely be. Could you imagine the power that fight would be if it was on Fox or something like that? I doubt the UFC would do that. They would definitely would want to put this behind a paywall. But there's a lot of financial value when it comes to Nick Diaz versus Anderson Silva. I would watch that. I would get excited for that. As a welterweight contender, in my opinion, I don't see him really being a welterweight contender because he. I personally believe right now he will lose to Rory McDonald, but I think that would be a good test for Rory. I feel like he would get defeated by Johnny Hendricks and Robbie Lawler. He would probably beat Tyron Woodley, but other than that, like where will we be again with another Nick Diaz coming back into the promotion and then maybe winning one fight, losing another fight, and then saying I'm retired. Like I don't want to go through that whole thing again. So I can get down with him fighting like kind of freak show fight. Hell, they just signed Joe Riggs as well too. So they should just put them in a hospital and let them fight again. Like if they want to go that route, I would watch that as well too. But I just don't see Nick Diaz being a big time contender. Maybe if he moved up to middleweight and stayed there and fought there, that would kind of throw a hinge into his career, maybe create some more excitement there. But I think it'd be good to see him come back once, and I would love to see him fight Anderson Silva.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Anderson probably wins that fight. Nick Diaz quits again. Then Anderson quits again soon after. It kind of kills it. But the welterweight division is somewhat stale, with Johnny Hendricks constantly being injured. I think it needs someone like Diaz who can give the big name fights because it is lacking star power. That division is definitely lacking star power. So I believe, if I said a fight with Matt Brown would be very interesting. Both guys coming off losses. Stylistically, that's a good matchup for Diaz to get the win. Then perhaps, a rematch with Robbie Lawler at some point. He's beaten Robbie Lawler before. A lot of people would want to see that again.
That's a good one too as well. So that's also a good point there as well. I don't know. Do you think he should stay at 170 or move to 185?
I think he definitely has to stay at 170. He's not a big guy. There's no fights I really want to see him fight at 185. The only fight that actually would somewhat interest me, purely from a freak show point of view, would be a Mayhem Miller fight, just because of the beef that those guys had. But obviously Mayhem Miller's never getting back into the UFC, so we're not going to see that. So I think he should just stick to his weight class. I'm somewhat tired of guys moving up in weight classes, moving down in weight classes, getting beaten, and then blaming the weight class for the loss.
What if he fought like a Vitor Belfort? I would love to see like the pre-fight circus around that as well.
Man, Vitor would kill him. Diaz isn't a big guy.
He would kill him for sure. But I mean, I'm just thinking of like promotional wise. I would love to see that fight being built up.
Well, I think the biggest fight that the UFC have in that welterweight division right now would be Johnny Hendricks v Nick Diaz. That would sell the most buys. It would definitely outsell what Robbie Lawler v Johnny Hendricks 2 was going to sell. I think that fight's very interesting. I think that matchup stylistically is very interesting. I think if Johnny Hendricks stands with Nick Diaz, Johnny Hendricks loses the belt because I think Nick Diaz's volume and head movement is too much for Johnny Hendricks's, rock and sock and robot stand up. I think that fight's very interesting. But obviously Diaz needs to get the win before he can do any of these fights. So I think
Yeah,
I really think they should do the Diaz v Matt Brown. I think it makes sense on so many different levels.
it does, and I think that that's a fight that Diaz can win and kind of insert himself into the title picture as well. So I agree with you on that. So let's keep going from there, and let's talk about another big signing that went down last week. Henry Cejudo was signed by the UFC, and he is he's a big name in American wrestling. He's the youngest individual to ever win a gold medal. He won a gold at the 2008 Olympics, and he attempted to win another one in 2012, but he didn't make the team, and he effectively retired from freestyle wrestling at that point. And he said, I want to go into MMA. But one of the most interesting things about Henry is that he never competed at the college level. He won two state titles, two in maybe California, but I know he won two in Arizona, and let me look. The other two were in Colorado. Yeah, so he won four total, and then he ended up going to the USA Wrestling Facility Group, where he was there training with the purpose of winning a gold medal in the Olympics, and he did that in 2008. He's 6-0 in MMA. He was fighting at 135. He was trying to make 125, but now he's coming into the UFC, and he's going to be fighting Scott Jorgensen at UFC 177. What do you think about this signing there? And are we looking at someone who can be a potential contender at both flyweight and bantamweight?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see him come over to the UFC. I think the problem is he hasn't made the weight yet, and he struggled to get down to the weight or close to the weight before. Um, I think from the performances I've watched by him, he hasn't looked by any means amazing. His wrestling hasn't even looked amazing toward MMA, which has been bizarre. Scott Jorgensen is no easy task either, so that fight could definitely prove to be an upset. I'm somewhat interested to see what sort of contract he was signed on with the UFC. Is he going to be on the standard UFC rate, or is he going to be on crazy money because he's an Olympic gold medalist? But it's going to be very interesting to see how he gets on.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he got a little more than the standard rate, uh, just because he has that Olympic gold medal to kind of carry himself on. So that would definitely be an interesting point there. I think that what we're seeing a lot is that we're seeing a lot of guys struggle with their wrestling background, bringing it into MMA. Even Daniel Cormier, who's another Olympic standout, his wrestling didn't look fantastic until he fought Josh Barnett, and then now and even still he doesn't use it as much as people think he should. When he fought Dan Henderson, he just basically played catch with him for 10 minutes before putting him away, which was one thing based on the size. But again, that's another example. Or even Sarah McMahon, she's another gold, not gold medal, excuse me. She won a silver medal, and her wrestling has, I'm not want to say it hasn't looked great, but it hasn't been her main weapon in the cage so far. So again, I think that's something that these guys have to grow into. I'm interested in seeing what Henry does in the organization, especially on if he can make weight, because both divisions need some guys who can draw attention, and I think Henry can kind of catch some eyes. He's still young. He's only 28 years old, so he has a lot of growing to do within the sport as well.
Yeah, it should be interesting. As you said, the divisions do definitely need a big name to come down. From what I've seen, he isn't going to make it to the upper echelon of the division. Even just on an aspect of movement and speed. When you compare to guys like John Dodson, Demetrius Johnson, even Dominic Cruz before his injury, and TJ Dillashaw, his movement isn't even on a level. His speed isn't on a level. Obviously, he's going to have an advantage in a wrestling match against these guys, but his stand-up and his footwork haven't quite developed. As you said, he's 6-0, but still, for a guy of his athletic caliber, you'd expect more more growth in his performances. And he's dropped out. He, a year ago he no showed away into one of his fights. He's pulled out of fights of late notice. He's been very unprofessional. He's missed weight. And that all kind of, to me, says something about his character. And in MMA, it's your character that makes you grow as a fighter. It's guys like Matt Brown who's so strong-willed that force him to get better and get better and get better. It seems like Cejudo has somewhat wilted mentally since winning his Olympic gold medal. I'm not an expert on the situation, but like, what happened to him with regards to the 2012 Olympics? Why didn't he make the Olympic team?
He lost in the Olympic trials. At the time, I can't remember who beat him, but yeah, he didn't make the team, which is which interestingly enough happens a lot in Olympic wrestling. There are a lot of guys not named Kel Sanderson who have made it one year and not been able to make it 4 years later just because of the grind of the sport. So that turnover doesn't really bother me too much.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's go to one other topic. We talked about Olympic wrestlers, and Dan Cormier has gotten some great news this week as he is stepping into space. John Jones, since Alexander Gustafsson has been hurt. So what do you think about that fight now? I think that let's look at this in two ways. First, from a business standpoint, is this fight more valuable than Alexander Gustafsson being there originally? Like, do you think this fight is going to sell as much and be as much of a big deal now that Daniel Cormier is there fighting John Jones? Or is this, and let's look at it from a competition side, can Daniel Cormier win this fight? Will he win this fight? Or is John Jones going to be able to find a way to kind of fight his style of fight as well? So let's look at it from 2 points of view.
Yeah, firstly, it's going to do a lot more pay-per-view buys, purely because the reason that Daniel Cormier has obviously figured out Fox a lot, and secondly, it'll just have more of a reason for American fans to buy it. Obviously, pay-per-views don't exist in Europe in regards to UFC, so Gustafsson's not going to drive up pay-per-view buys in Europe because there is none. Whereas Cormier, I feel, will push up pay-per-view buys in America, and I think a lot of casual fans will tune in for that fight. And the fight, like last night, they got a free advertisement for the fight with having Daniel Cormier on the show.
Yeah, that's definitely true there as well. I think I agree with you. I feel like even though Gustafsson had that great fight with Jones in 2013, I feel like this fight is going to get more attention simply because Daniel Cormier is going to have more opportunity to talk about the fight. Fox is going to have more reasoning to talk about the fight, seeing how he is on their show every week. And I think another thing that a lot of people haven't talked about yet is that this fight will be going on during football season as well. So this gives them another promotional opportunity with football being on Fox on how they can promote that fight for sure. So I'm looking forward to seeing how well it does from a numbers point of view. Competition wise, I'm a John Jones fan. I'm not even gonna lie about it. I like what he's done since coming into the sport, and I think that he had I feel like he has that star power opportunity from just the way he looks to what he's done and how he competes. And I like the controversy that he tends to bring whenever people turn on him. And I think that this is the toughest fight that he'll have at this point in his career because Daniel Cormier will be able to take him down at will. If he can get in close and get his hands on John Jones, then John is going to be in trouble because we've seen him throw around heavyweight like it's nothing. I remember him tossing Josh Barnett over, like he almost hit the Ultimate Warrior Gorilla Press Slam on Josh Barnett like it was nothing. He almost hit Dan Henderson with what looked like a pro wrestling power bomb. Like this guy is just throwing guys left and right, and now he's going to face Jones, who is smaller than both of those men or other men he's fought in the past. So that takedown opportunity is there.
Yeah, I think if he can get close to John Jones, he will take him down. But it's one thing getting close to John Jones, It's hard to see how he can close the distance on John Jones. John Jones is obviously so great at using his reach. His jab is impeccable. His kicks are just great for range finding. As much as I'd like to see this fight turn into a wrestling match, I have a feeling we're going to see this fight turn into a kickboxing match, and it will be John Jones on the outside landing the better strikes.
One thing I think we're going to see a lot of is we're going to see a lot of push kicks to like the knees. We're going to see those a lot of low kicks to kind of get to take some of the steam out of Daniel Cormier's legs, which is a wrestler's power point. I hope we don't see anything bad like injury wise, but we're definitely going to see Jones use his reach to his advantage there. I believe John does have the longest reach in the UFC right now. Someone pointed out that Cormier has faced guys who has long reach, like Antonio Silva, but no one has a reach just like Jones does. So I think that's something that's going to be vital to that fight as well. I'm looking forward to it though. This definitely makes me want to watch the fight even more, and I feel like it's going to get even more hyped up between now and then.
Yeah, I agree.
So before we go, let's look at some of the questions that we got via Twitter from this week. And someone pointed out, that having Nick Diaz in the welterweight division should be pretty good now, seeing how there aren't as many wrestlers who are kind of dominating the division right now. Someone brought up fighting Roy McDonald in Halifax. How do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that could be a good fight. I think the fact that Diaz is coming off losses make it a little less interesting, because obviously Rory somewhat deserves the big fight now, I think. But it's doable. I think Diaz will be on pay-per-view when he comes back, or Fox, not a Fight Pass or not a FX event or Fuel event. So I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be an interesting fight.
Let me ask you this: do you think that Nick Diaz could be a Hector Lombard?
Could he beat him? Absolutely. In a 5-round fight, I'd give him the advantage, definitely.
Yeah, I would definitely give him there too. And, you still have guys. I think a fight with Dong Young Kim would be kind of exciting because Kim's not going to stop coming until he gets put away. What about Tarek Saffiedine though?
That's interesting. I think Saffiedine would play the Carlos Condit route and stay on the outside, throwing lots of kicks to the legs and bodies. It wouldn't be very exciting. I feel Saffiedine could very well win that fight, but if he does win it, it would be very reminiscent of Condit v Diaz.
Yeah, that's definitely a fight that Tarek Saffiedine is one of those guys that everybody kind of forgets about because he's all often injured and he's not really pushed like he should be. But he's someone that's worth watching in this division as well too. So let's look at some of the other questions we have. Someone mentioned about having Cejudo, if he loses, adding him to a season of Tough. Have they ever done that before? I know Ulysses Gomez, when he came into the UFC and he fought as a flyweight, he lost to John Moraga. They cut him, and then he tried to go sign up for a season of Tough, and they wouldn't let him sign up for that as well. So have there ever been a situation where they allowed the fighter to kind of take a step back and join a Tough season?
Yeah, a number of guys on Tough 10, the heavyweights, were ex-UFC guys. I can't remember from the top of my head what the guys' names were, but I know a few of them had fought.
I know Wes Sims was one.
Yeah, a few of the guys. One of the guys had fought Anthony Hardonk. I can't remember who it was. But yeah, in the comeback season, obviously, as well. But yeah, I think it's doable. I think obviously with his name, I think they could be better off putting him into a season of Tough right now. Doing a big season of Tough with the flyweight division. But obviously that's not going to happen.
Yeah, especially if he was able to win. I think that would be a pretty good way to grow him as a fighter in the sport going forward. What are you working on for this week for MMA Ratings?
Yeah, I'm looking into a few things. The EFC Africa card is coming up, and it's being headlined by an Irish fighter of Nigerian origin, Henry Felipe. At the moment, he's the only Irish fighter who's a champion, a big champion. EFC is the biggest organisation in Africa. They regularly get 20,000 people to their events. So I might do a piece on the only Irish champion and kind of interview him and build up to his big fight. which would be pretty cool.
Have you already talked to him yet, or are you still
Yeah,
working on it?
I actually promoted him in earlier in his career. When he fought back in Ireland, he fought twice on my show, and he actually won the middleweight belt of my show. So I've known him for years. He's only 22. He started off his career at 18. He was an amateur at 18. He won 6 fights in a row by first round knockout. So he's forced to go pro, even though he'd only been training 6 months. Then he fought against a lot of tough guys, and he got a lot of losses against tough guys because he wasn't training and he wasn't doing anything. But since then, he's bounced back and he's done well. He went to EFC Africa and he fought their big champion, their champion that had been very heavily hyped, and he went out there and knocked him out in the first round with his knee, his ACL torn. He came to the fight with a torn ACL and still knocked out their champion in the first. It's a very interesting story.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'm looking forward to reading. You're kind of like my pipeline to MMA across the pond, so I definitely appreciate what you're doing, like in any of your work that you put forth. I basically, I'm going to put out my fights to make peace for this week. I'm going to have that out probably Monday. I'm looking forward to just a break. We have a little bit of a lull before the next UFC event, before the next major event. So I'm kind of going to take this opportunity to look around at some of the smaller promotions and see what they have to offer, or see if I can kind of score some interviews. I'm trying to land an interview with a competitor from Metamorphs 4, which is August 9th, which I think is going to be a good event as well, too, with Josh Barnett and Chael Sonnen fighting. They have one surprise event. I think that surprise fight is going to be another big name MMA competitor going into grappling. I'm not going to say who yet, but so I'm looking forward to trying to get that interview and get some feedback back on that. But I'm looking forward to covering some of these smaller cards and seeing who I can talk to.
Yeah, I think Metamorphs is very interesting, and I think what they're doing with regards to getting MMA guys to fight with them or to compete with them is obviously going to help grappling no end. I think the amount of people who tune in for Chael Sonnen v Galvao is going to be crazy. Do you know if that's going to be broadcast on Fight Pass? And if not, I think it definitely should be broadcast on Fight Pass.
I don't think so. I don't know, because especially with the UFC kind of cutting ties with Chael Sonnen across the board, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't do it. Um, but I don't believe so.
Well, you know that they showed his meeting with the NSAC
Yeah,
on
and
Fight
he's
Pass. So
yeah, that's true. And
I'm sure they'll try to. I think, to be honest, it's a matter of time before Chael gets back in with the UFC fold. I think the broadcasts miss his charisma. I think he's a very interesting guy. He adds a lot to the broadcasts, and I think he'll probably be back. In some sort of way. Just ask you this just before we finish. Chael's ban was 2 years. Do you see him fighting after his ban finishes?
see, my understanding of the situation was his ban is 2 years from when he tries to get a new license. Is that right?
His fighting ban will be 2 years. Yes, so he'll have to apply for a license before his next fight. But obviously, if he
And,
uh, if he works at NSAC, he will get the license back.
and see, like, so that's the thing. Like, if he applies for a license today, his next fight wouldn't be until 2016. So, has he already applied for a license, or is he like completely done?
No, he won't. The license, he'll have to apply for a license once his suspension is ran through. So the day his suspension finishes, he can apply for a license.
Okay, okay,
He
okay,
can't take
okay,
a fight until then. But
okay.
yeah, 2 years will make him 39. Without testosterone replacement therapy, without steroids, without HGH, without EPO, can he realistically make a comeback in MMA? Probably not. But I think
See,
the next 2 years we're going to see him compete very, very heavily in grappling.
the thing is, man, with Chael, I feel like he's taken so many fights knowing that he wasn't going to win. He fought Rashad Evans. He knew he wasn't going to win that fight. He fought John Jones. He knew he wasn't going to win that fight, but he got paid. He was still one of the highest paid guys from those events. So I still see, maybe he does try to take maybe two or three more fights if he needed to, and he just raked in big money. But again, that all depends on if the UFC is willing to deal with him and promote him to that point.
I think money talks, and I think the UFC need like money. So I think Chael will bring back money. I think Chael will be back in the organization. I'd be surprised if this time next year Chael wasn't working with the UFC once more.
Yeah, I would be too as well. So again, thank you everybody for listening to the show. My name is Raphael, and you can follow me on Twitter at @rgarcia_sports. And my partner is Roy Billington. You can follow him at Roy Billington, and you can also follow MMA Ratings Net on Twitter and Instagram. And always check out the website at MMAratings.net and catch us every single day. We tend to put out content on a daily basis, and we will be back next Sunday to talk more about the world of MMA and combat sports. So again, thanks for listening, and have a great day.